Ladies and gentlemen, from the Universal Church of Freedom, Peace and Justice, Deacon Gerald Celente.
Hello, this is Deacon Celente of the Universal Church of Freedom, Peace and Justice. Freedom we've lost, peace no one talks about, and justice, no, just us. That's all they go after. The big criminals get a free ride. Again, the facts speak for the fact that it's a very split system. Those on the top do what they want. The rest of us have to do what they tell us to do. Our liberties have been lost. The governments are in control of our lives. The war in Ukraine keeps on escalating. Why? Because of the military-industrial complex that Dwight D. Eisenhower, five-star general, Supreme Commander of the Allied Forces, and two-term president, warned us in his farewell address in January 1961 that they would rob us of the genius of the scientists, the sweat of the laborers, and the future of the children. And that's who's being enriched with the Ukraine war. Biden pledges aid and Johnson urges former sanctions. U.S. President Joseph Biden pledged $500 million in assistance in a phone call with Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky, the White House said. $500 million. And today, the U.S. Department of Defense will allocate another $300 million in military aid to Ukraine, Pentagon spokesman John Kirby said. Through the USAI, Ukrainian Security System Initiative, Department of Defense will provide up to $300 million in security assistance to bolster Ukraine's capacity to defend themselves. So the United States has now committed more than $2.3 billion in military aid to Ukraine since this war, even before this, since January 2021, including more than $1.6 billion in security assistance, they call it. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson told his cabinet this past week that he wants to provide Ukraine with more, quote, lethal aid. Lethal. Deadly. Deadly aid. The definition, sufficient to cause death, harmful or destructive. And then we just heard from the British Defense Minister, quote, there'll be more lethal aid going into Ukraine. Yep, a number of countries have come forward. And again, earlier this week, Prime Minister Boris Johnson told his cabinet that he wants to send Kiev more lethal weapons. It's one after another. The Times said that Prime Minister also impressed with Kiev's use of Turkish-made Baraka TB attack drones and was keen for the U.S. to provide Ukraine with anti-ship missiles and more defense systems. Boris Johnson promised an additional 6,000 anti-tank and high-explosive missiles. Not a peep about peace. Not a peep about peace. Yep, more killing. According to the White House, Biden and Zelensky discussed how the United States is working around the clock to fulfill the main security assistance request by Ukraine, the critical effects those weapons have. So there you have it. More lethal aid, sufficient to cause death, harmful, or destructive. No one is talking about peace. It's become a dirty word. Today, the Pope came out, and he's sorry for the abuses in Canada. Pope Francis asked forgiveness, this is Friday, for the abuse of Canadian Indigenous children at Catholic Church-run residential schools. For over a century. They were silent for over a century. The Catholic Church is involved in schools, the Pope told Indigenous leaders gathered at the Vatican. I ask God's forgiveness. The Pope's apology, long sought by Indigenous leaders in Canada, is part of what's going on. Although Pope Francis has met several times with victims, the numbers are here. They're devastating. For more than a century, Canadian authorities removed some 150,000 Indigenous children from their families. These are the people that attack other countries for what they do while they commit these horrors. 150 Indigenous children from their families by force placed them in residential schools where many were abused. At least 4,100 children died while residing at these schools, but the commission said the death toll was likely higher. They found more than 1,000 possible unmarked graves. The abuse of these children by the Canadians who keep sending more armaments to kill and keep the war going in Ukraine. I was raised Catholic. The Catholic Church, what it is, what it became, and who's leading it is not the Jesus that I was taught to love. And how anybody that claims to be a priest or a nun that commits these abuses, and this is only the small part of it. There's sexual abuses that they denied up in 2000. The only reason they are sorry is because they've been caught. All over the world, how these priests abused all the boys, brutalizing them with sexual sickness of their minds. And I've been abused by the Catholic Church. When I was in the 5th grade, I was beaten up by Sister Marie Rosaire, who grabbed me by my little tie and slapped me until she broke my middle ear and perforated my middle ear and broke my eardrum. And then she left me back, so I was the stupidest kid in school. And I was the toughest kid, the little kid, that had to defend myself against bullies, that lost my balance. I was a great athlete. I could no longer go swimming or water skiing to get my ears wet for the rest of my life. This is a daughter of God? Where is the Catholic Church? All they have been is abusive. Abusive. Where are the Presbyterians? Where are the Mormons? Where are the Seventh-day Adventists? Not a peep about peace. But boy, has the Catholic Church brutalized millions. It destroyed my life until I got my fight back and learned how to fight. Where are they? Oh, they apologize like all of these politicians and all of these people that commit these atrocious acts. They only apologize when they get caught. The United States talks about the brutality in the people in Russia. How about the guy that ran the Department of Defense for the United States, General Mattis? It's quite fun to shoot them, you know. It's a hell of a hoot. It's fun to shoot some people. A quote. In 2005, he said, you go into Afghanistan, you got guys who slap women around for 5 years because they don't wear a veil. You know, guys like that ain't got no manhood left anyway. So it's a hell of a lot of fun to shoot them. This is from the former Defense Secretary of the United States, a retired Marine general. His name was James, quote, Mad Dog Mattis, and how the media elevated this person. And this has become the spirit of society. He continued, actually, it's quite fun to fight them, you know. It's a hell of a hoot. It's fun to shoot some people. I'll be right up there with you. I like brawling. Peace? How dare you raise your voice and speak of peace, Deacon Salenti? Another quote by Mad Dog Mattis. There are some assholes in the world that just need to be shot. Yep. Be polite, be professional, but have a plan to kill everybody you meet. This is the mentality of America. It's the mentality of NATO. I am totally opposed to the Russian invasion. As the founder of the Universal Church of Freedom, Peace, and Justice, I also understand the whys it happened that are totally ignored. And on the other front, forcing people to get vaccinations, wearing masks, and taking their liberty from them. This is an article from the New York Times this week. About 78% of all hospitalized adolescents and 82% of younger children had one or more underlying medical condition like obesity, autoimmune disease, and asthma that got COVID. All right? 42% of Americans are obese. 70% are overweight. The people that are dying from COVID, the numbers show the vast majority have pre-existing comorbidities. Yet, New York City's requirement that young children wear masks in daycare and pre-kindergarten settings will continue. Yep. After an appellate judge stayed a lower court ruling that threw out the so-called toddler mask mandates. The mayor of New York has required young children to wear masks in daycare and pre-kindergarten. The mayor. We have lost our freedom when these kind of people can impose these kind of dictates. Judge Paul Wooten granted the stay after a Friday evening hearing. New York Mayor Eric Adams and city health officials said earlier that they hope to keep the requirement as the daily number of coronavirus infections in the city increased. Are they increasing among children that age that don't die from this? The numbers add up to almost nothing. And the ones that do and have died have pre-existing comorbidities. Yep. We're telling people to take extra precautions. Imagine, young children to wear masks in daycare and pre-kindergarten. Yep. The numbers are right here. 82% of the younger children had one or more underlying medical conditions. 82%. And you're forcing this on children that barely or ever die from this? This is the Adams that granted athletes that play professional sports and celebrities don't have to get vaccinated. But city workers must get vaccinated. He fired over 1,600. We, the people, have lost our liberty, our freedom, and our justice. World War III has begun. The hatred in the daily news around the Western world is nonstop. I am totally opposed to the war. And I am totally opposed to keeping it going. There must be a ceasefire. Where is the Pope? Where are the princesses, the kings, and the queens? Where is the media? Name me one religion other than the universal church of freedom, peace, and justice that's calling for peace and to stop this war. How dare people say we're going to spend people's money to send more lethal military aid. Lethal. Sufficient to cause death. Harmful. Yep. Or destructive. Keep the murder going. That's the mainstream media. And that is the message from NATO and the United States. And again, silence. Silence. I'm a believer, and again, the Universal Church of Freedom, Peace, and Justice, you believe in your own God. The God you believe in is of a higher order. And not to use God's name in vain. Like God blessed the troops for killing people. God doesn't bless that. Thank you, and we'll see you next week.